This is from the Huffington Post. A terminal cancer patient who says he grew marijuana to treat his tumors was found guilty of drug charges yesterday by an Iowa jury that wasn't even allowed to hear his defense. Benton Mackenzie, who's 48 years old, was convicted in Iowa District Court jury of marijuana manufacturing and conspiracy, along with his wife Loretta, who's 43. Their son Cody, who's 22, was found guilty of misdemeanor possession of marijuana and paraphernalia. Are you kidding me? Benton Mackenzie, who had been barred by the judge from a defense that explains he grew cannabis. Defense. Hey man, sometimes I say modem, and people get super freaked out about that too. His defense that explains that he grew cannabis to relieve, this is very serious, his aggressive and rare cancer of his blood vessels. He faces a minimum of 3 years in prison, where he's going to be sentenced later. His family said that they intend to appeal the verdict, and by the way, Mackenzie said that prison will probably kill him anyway, because his health is in such a horrible, horrible disarray.
Yeah. So the crazy part of the story is that the judge didn't even allow him to use his illness as part of his defense, right?
Which I don't understand.
So in Iowa, the reason why the judge was able to legally do that is because they have not legalized medicinal marijuana. So since medicinal marijuana is illegal, you can't use it as part of your defense. Now, there is an exception for those who have epilepsy. There we go. So if you have epilepsy, you can use medicinal marijuana in Iowa, but that is not what he has. He has a terminal cancer.
So he was just using this for pain relief.
He was using this for pain relief.
He doesn't have epilepsy, which is, I'm sure, no picnic.
First time anyone's ever been bummed out they didn't have epilepsy.
Exactly. Yeah. He has something that's so horrible and creates lesions on his skin, and he says he's probably going to die from it in a few years anyway.
Yeah, it's the good news is that that's a decision that there's no good news, but the ray of hope.
Yeah.
We could find. Eventually we'll find the right cliche. Keep searching. The ray of hope here, I would think, as a non-lawyer who watches a lot of shows with lawyers on them, so I pretty much know what I'm talking about. But that would be that the judge's decision here, that seems appealable. And that not being allowed to state your defense, which again, I mean, it's essentially like saying to a jury, if a guy, someone does something terrible and kills a family member, and then the family member responds by killing the guy, the judge telling the jury, no, you can't even hear about what his state of mind was at the time.
Yeah.
Like, that's not, we don't have an exception to murder for that, but
Right.
I would imagine you'd be able to say that because you'd want to win sympathy with the jury, and having the jury sympathize with your plight would be
helpful,
relevant here. So I would imagine that could be actionable and might get him a new trial, especially from a judge who is just sympathetic to it and knows that even scheduling a new trial is going to delay the process and keep him out of prison.
And I would think that the other thing, and again, this just might be the hippy-dippy Californian in me, but even if they don't hear that defense, I pray that members of the jury are like, it was weed. Why are we having this conversation?
Right.
And I'm from the Midwest, and I know that people take this stuff a lot more seriously, and the lax nature of getting high and blah, blah, has not really reached the middle of the country in a lot of cases. But I would like to think that in 2014 there are going to be people like, whatever.
I'm surprised a little by it. I'm surprised by, there's something, we're over 20 states now that at least have some form of medicinal marijuana.
Right.
Some states, of course, have legalized it completely. I'm surprised Iowa isn't one of them. Of those Midwestern states, you're from Kansas. Mm-hmm. Kansas is conservative. Nebraska is conservative. Iowa isn't.
Yeah.
Parts of it are, but it's a fairly progressive state. It's a blue state. It's had Democratic governors. It's elected Democrats. Iowa, and keep in mind,
to give you a number, really quickly, I got to jump in. 81% of people living in Iowa are in favor of marijuana legalization. So yes, it's very liberal when it comes to this issue, but they still haven't legalized it.
So you could get the right judge, because also remember that the Iowa Supreme Court was one of the first, I think I'm right about this, was one of the first state Supreme Courts to allow gay marriage. Like they threw out the only man and woman statute, and gay marriages were happening in Iowa. So, as he works his way up, hopefully nobody's going to try to put this guy in prison pending his appeal.
Right. And I guess the ray of hope is that if it didn't happen in a state where it's legal, at least it was Iowa, if they have those stats, in his favor.
I mean, look, if he's convicted and they reject his appeal, he faces a minimum of 3 years behind bars, which is crazy. And look, I think the reason why the jury was alarmed in this particular case is because he had 71 plants. Right. So the prosecutors went after him for selling it, although there wasn't evidence that he was selling it.
Right, and so essentially his only crime
is... So he's only convicted of use. They weren't, or they were, what else?
Yeah. And that his wife is involved, and that his son is involved. But it sounds like his only crime here is geography, because if he was just in another state, this wouldn't be happening. That's what makes this so sad to me.
So I'm going to use that next time I get busted with a hooker.
I'm sorry I don't live in Nevada.
Yeah.
God.